Viewer beware, you're in for a scare. Because number 17 is the Ghost type. First off, out of all 17, Ghost is the least common type there is, with only 27 in existence so far. The worst case of this is Generation 2, which added a whopping 1 Ghost Pokemon to the lineup. Another thing I don't like about the Ghost type is its move pool. It's rather small, and all the moves it does have 100% accuracy or higher. This means that Ghost types have a tendency to really tick me off when facing them. Also, there's something I just can't understand. Before Generation 4, Ghost moves were considered physical moves, but the average Ghost type has higher special stats than physical stats. Contradiction much? Another thing is that Ghost types don't often appear until towards the end of your game, so I find it difficult to find a place for them in my party. Lastly, it's weak against its own type. How the hell does that work? But there are still a few things I like about this type. I like their concept and designs, their overall stats aren't half bad, and I think it's really cool that Sableye and Spiritomb have no weaknesses. Still, they are my least favorite type. Like I said before, it's not a bad type, it's just not the one for me. And before I move on...
Soon I'll be a beautiful butterfly, even though I should be a moth.
Statistically speaking, bug types are the weakest type there is. With mediocre stats, lack of powerful moves through Generation 2, several types resisting it, often exploited weakness to rock, and lack of super effective hits due to common pairings with poison. Also, a lot of their designs are rather uninspired, and unless you count Arceus holding an insect plate, which I don't, there is only one legendary bug type as of now. So, in a nutshell, bug types are often some of the weakest. I don't think anyone can deny that. However, Generation 3 really took notice of this. It added a few rather powerful bug types, and all gens after that added more powerful bug type moves, such as X-Scissor and Bug Buzz. Also, if you know what you're doing, you can use bug types rather effectively in double and especially triple battles. They also evolved rather quickly, making up for the low stats early on, though that superiority doesn't last for very long. At the end of the day, though I do like bug types, even I can't deny that they're one of the worst, which is why they're number 16. The Ice type has the worst defenses of any type. It's only resistant to itself and has 4 weaknesses. This makes using them a hassle, as I'll often find myself being defeated very easily by enemies, usually by an unexpected fighting type move. Also, like the Ghost type, Ice is one of the least common types in existence, with only 31 currently. I'm not a big fan of this type's designs either. Of the 31, the only designs I really like are Glaceon, Weavile, Articuno, and Kyurem. But wait, Super Flipper, Ice can induce a status ailment! While that is true, let me put it this way. To induce a burn, you can use Will-O-Wisp. For paralysis, Thunder Wave. Poison, Toxic. Sleep, Hypnosis. However, there is no move to induce freezing. That means that you have to rely on luck for freezing to work, and that is one thing I never want to rely on in a Pokemon battle. But now, let's look at the positives. The Ice type has some pretty powerhouse moves, such as Blizzard, Freeze Shock, Frost Breath, Ice Beam, Ice Burn, Icicle Crash, Icicle Spear, and the one-hit wonder Sheer Cold. Also, if the trainer knows what they're doing, Ice types are a force to be reckoned with in double battles. Lastly, their overall stats are some of the best, with an average of 511 when fully evolved. Final verdict, Ice type has some things going for it, but for me, it's just a pain in the ice. It's just dirt! Here's one of the more controversial selections for my list. Unlike most people, I do not like using the ground type. First off, its battle properties do not work in its favor. The type is very physically based, which is not a bad thing by any means, but all of its weaknesses are special types, meaning that it hardly has any defense to help it push through its weaknesses. Also, I don't find its move pool very impressive. Only a few of its moves have high power, Earthquake can actually hurt your teammate, and it doesn't have very many moves that are useful for strategy. The ground type is most useful as a heavy hitter, which is a strategy that I personally am not fond of. The only real strategy move it has in its arsenal is Sand Attack! Oh my god, I hate Sand Attack! But there are several things I like about it too. For instance, it has a one-hit KO move, and I like that, despite how much luck is involved. It's also the only type that can effectively take down the somewhat pesky electric type. Also, it's super effective against 5 types, which is tied with fighting for the most of any type. Lastly, the designs for ground types are, for the most part, surprisingly cool. Note that I said mostly. Okay, so the first 4 types on this list were types that I do not like and rarely use in battle. But that stops here. The rest of these types are ones that I do like to use. On that note, number 13 is the normal type. Now I know what you're thinking.
Why did you choose normal types? They're so weak.
Well, yes, aside from Bug, normal types are the weakest statistically, and they're also not super effective against any type. But that is made up for in spades by their gargantuan move pool that allows for much customization and strategy. Also, the normal type is the second most common type there is, though whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is up to interpretation. Many normal types will often appear towards, if not at the beginning of your journey, meaning that they're very easy to incorporate into your party. Lastly, most normal types can learn a surprising amount of moves from an even more surprising amount of types. Easily the best example of that is Tauros, who can learn moves from 14 of the 17 types. 14! Granted, some members of this type are pretty sucky individually, but as a group, I think the normal type is rather underrated. Here's another big shock, no pun intended. Electric is only at number 12. Now, while I personally don't use electric types too often, I still like it. First off, electric is, fittingly so, the fastest type you can have, as well as having very high special attack. They also only have one weakness, the previously mentioned ground type, and the rest of their stats are okay. On the other hand, a lot of their most powerful moves are unreliable for one reason or another. Only 1 or 2 of their moves can be used strategically, and their designs aren't that impressive. However, I do like several members of the type individually, keeping the type as a whole from being any lower. Now, I have a theory as to why most other people like the electric type more than me. Whether they realize it or not, their affection towards the electric type was the result of none other than Ash's Pikachu. But hey, it's just a theory. So slow! Of all 17 types, I'd say that rock types are the most unbalanced. I mean, just look at these stats! Look at those battle properties! This makes them wholly unpredictable, both on your side and your opponent's. Depending on very unpredictable circumstances, rock types can either be the Kratos of the Pokemon world or the... well... basically what I'm trying to say is that using rock types in battle is a big gamble. But it's always a gamble I'm happy to take. You see, rock is the type that is easily the hardest to understand and takes a lot of time to figure out how to use to the fullest effect. But when you do figure it out, they're practically unstoppable. My big complaint about this type though is that it has a move pool of only 15 moves. That doesn't give you a lot to work with. Also, why is the rock type gym leader the first one you always fight first? But regardless, the rock type is the ultimate type of choice for the perfectionist in you, and mastery of it could very well be your greatest asset. Rock on, Game Freak.
Failure.
But there's one they fear. In their tongue, he's Dovahkiin, Dragonborn.
Oh god. If there was ever an overpowered type, it's definitely Dragon. It's easily the strongest type offensively, with standout attack stats and several devastatingly powerful physical attacks. This makes Dragon types the ultimate heavy hitters, not to mention the crapload of legendaries and pseudo-legendaries of this type. Hell, even most of their designs are overpowered. Just look at those! They make you know the Dragon types shouldn't be messed with. But there's still a few things about it that I really don't like. First off, you only encounter them at later points in the game, making them tough to add to your team, which has been well established by this point. Also, they take so long to evolve. Level 64?
Are you fucking kidding me?
Next, why is it the only special type that doesn't have an evolution? Some might call this nitpicking, but I say otherwise. Why is there no Dragon evolution? Lastly, their move pool is the smallest out of all types, with only 13 moves. Why should Hydreigon be able to learn more types than moves from its own type? That makes no sense! And oh yeah, it's the only type besides Ghost that is weak against itself. However, despite all of this, using Dragon types is a guilty pleasure, especially in double battles. Overpowered, yes. Bad? Hell no! Psychics are a specially based type with high special attack and good speed. They also have a ridiculous move pool that rivals even the normal type, and they have many varieties of moves, making them probably the most versatile of the types. You can build a Psychic type pretty much any way you want to. As a result, you never know what you're up against when facing a Psychic type. Also, if you thought Dragon had a lot of legendaries, you haven't seen anything yet. The Psychic type has, at last count, 14 legendaries. 14! Also, Game Freak did something with this type that I really admire the thought behind. Most Pokemon have weaknesses that make a lot of sense at first glance. For example, everyone knows that water puts out a fire, unless it's an electrical fire, and that water conducts electricity. But the Psychic type is not like that. Bug, Ghost, and Dark? What kind of choices are those? Well, those three are all common types of fears. And since Psychic is a type of the mind, it actually makes sense that it would be susceptible to those types.
That's very interesting.
But there's the flip side. In Generation 1, Psychic types were stupidly overpowered, due to there being no standout Bug-type moves at the time, and no weakness to Ghost and Dark. Also, I'm not too big a fan of their designs, aside from the legendaries of course. Also, Crunch, a move that is rather powerful and can be learned by a wide variety of Pokemon, is the Psychic type's kryptonite. But still, Psychics are a type that have a lot of appeal to them, and they can make you do this.
Hands on the ground, hands on the ground. Looking like a fool with your pants on the ground. With the gold in your mouth, hat turned sideways, pants hit the ground. Call yourself a cool cat.
So, they've got that going for them. The fighting type is, hands down, the most straightforward of the types. What do? Kick and punch their way to victory. No tricks, no gimmicks, no dancing around, just in-your-face aggression that anyone can learn to use very quickly. Their move pool is rather large, and consists of many powerful physical strikes, fittingly. They also have a high attack stats complement this. Also, as previously mentioned, fighting types are super effective against 5 different types, including the highly defensive Rock and Steel. In other words, fighting types are the ultimate heavy hitters. And rightfully so. But there are, of course, some drawbacks. For example, due to their average special defense and Psychic's superb special attack, fighting types can easily be taken down by Psychics. Also, their move pool is almost entirely physically based, which is good concerning its other qualities, but I would have liked to have seen at least a few specials. Also, fighting types are not the best type to use in double or triple battles, as they can only affect one Pokemon at a time. Final verdict, while they are straightforward, they are far from useless, and are one of the most commonly used offensive types. And here we have the first of the 3 starter types on this list, Grass. The way I see it, Grass is rather similar to the Rock type. It has a lot of pros and a lot of cons. If you don't have a lot of practice with Grass types, chances are they're not very helpful. But if you do know what you're doing, that Trickerita has the potential to haunt your opponent's nightmares. On the downside, most of this type's powerhouse attacks have some kind of negative effect, whether it be recoil damage, loss of turn, or self-induced confusion. Also, their battle properties are some of the worst, with 5 weaknesses and being resisted by 7 types. And as I discovered when I tried to break the system with math, the 2 worst type matchups you can possibly have in terms of battle properties are Grass Ice and Bug Grass. However, like I said, Grass types are a force to be reckoned with if the trainer knows how to use them. For instance, Grass types have well-balanced stats aside from speed, meaning that a good trainer uses the variety of special and status attacks to compensate. Speaking of which, the Grass type probably has the most balanced move pool of any type, with plenty of physical attacks with secondary effects, and a good assortment of special attacks that, if used properly, can sweep an entire party of Pokemon. Hell, I once played through Pokemon Diamond with an entire team of Grass Pokemon, and it was one of the best playthroughs I've ever done. Grass is a type that takes time to master, but it's well worth the wait. Three words. Hidden Machine 2. The Flying type is one of the most popular Pokemon types, and it's not hard to see why. No more walking! No more blacking out 2 steps from the next town! Okay, aside from Fly, what does the Flying type have to speak of? Well, they do have pretty good speed, which always helps. Their battle properties are very balanced. They're resistant to the cheap-as-hell Earthquake, and they are a godsend in triple battles, with all their moves except Air Cutter being able to hit any Pokemon on the field. And there's been at least 1 Flying type legendary in each generation. On the other hand, Flying types usually have low defenses that can result in catastrophic failure. Also, their move pool isn't very good, with only a few strategy attacks, with Tailwind being the only one that I use very often. Also, there's something about this type that I just don't understand. As of now, there are 84 Flying type Pokemon, but only 1 of them is pure Flying. But regardless, Flying types are always a welcome member on my team. No more walking! Kill with fire! The Fire type is one of the strongest types for offense you can possibly have, which is probably why it's so popular. Their attack stats are some of the best, and they even have pretty good speed, making them perfect as sweepers. They also have a wide array of powerful fiery attacks, many of which can cause a burn or paralysis. Also, as you all should know, Fire is one of the starter types, meaning that you can use one straight from the beginning of your journey. Also, I really like most of the Fire types' designs. Partially because I like the color red, and partially because they're just really cool looking. Also, many Fire types nowadays are able to learn Solar Beam, which completely counteracts their weaknesses. But just like all types, Fire does have its downsides. A lot of its most powerful attacks have heavy drawbacks when using them. Also, the Fire type has only 2 strategy attacks. Lastly, Fire types are sort of like Akuma from Street Fighter. They can dish out the pain easily, but they sure as hell can't take it thanks to their low defenses. However, most people find this negligible with its ferocious speed and attack, and the joy of burning things to death.
Fire hand! The fire hand! They're gonna eat you up, they don't care about you! They're gonna eat you up now! Fire, fire, fire! Yeah! Wow, you're gonna die!
Steel types are freaking tanks. Seriously, they resist 11 of the 17 types, and their defenses are sky high. These Pokemon can take quite a bit of punishment. This makes them a must for players who focus on a long-term strategy. However, they also have quite a bit of attack power to use during their time in battle. Several powerful physical attacks that don't have negative effects aid them in their tyranny over the battlefield. Also, their designs are usually pretty cool. In fact, the Steel type has my second favorite set of designs within it. But there's a few things that can cripple your success with Steel. Firstly, they're rather uncommon and hard to find, meaning that you'll have to do some good searching to find one. Also, their special attacks do not complement their stats. Shift Gear and Autotomize both raise speed, even though speed is not something that Steel types usually have, and Metal Sound lowers your opponent's special defense, despite Steel types having below average special attack. The only special Steel move I find myself using is Iron Defense, because it capitalizes on what the Steel type already does well in battle. Lastly, it's best to leave them out of double battles. Because of their high defenses, your opponent will be more inclined to gang up on your other Pokemon, and thusly eliminate them more quickly. But in solo battles, you better believe my Steel type will be one of the first I bring out. The top 3 on this list are types that I have come to love so much and have used so often that whenever possible, I always find a place for them somewhere on my team. I say whenever possible, because like the Steel type, this next type was not available during the first generation of Pokemon. Oh yeah, I'm talking about Dark. There are so many things I love about this type, and I can't honestly find any major flaws with it. Let's start at the beginning, and when I get to the end, stop. Aside from regular attack, Dark is one of the most balanced types there is, meaning that your strategy can focus more on exploiting your opponent's weaknesses rather than covering up your own. Second, like Grass, the Dark type's move pool is extremely balanced. There's a good mix of moderately powerful physical attacks, a variety of status attacks, and plenty of attacks with secondary effects that actually work in your favor. Also, I freaking love these designs. The Dark type has, hands down, my favorite designs out of all 17 types. Now, the things that a lot of people find wrong with this type are that it doesn't have any moves with a power over 100, and that they usually have pretty low defenses. While I can see why some people would be turned away by this, I have learned the ins and outs of this type and can safely say that in the right hands, those so-called disadvantages, are nothing. And although it's a bit disappointing that there hasn't been a Dark-type gym leader yet, it's almost endearing in a way, as if the type deserves no less than the Elite Four.
Nighttime sharpens, heightens each sensation. Darkness wakes and stirs imagination.
As soon as I say the name, most of you will instantly know what my number 1 is, but I'll get there when I get there. Number 2 on my list is the Water type. But the main reason why I love the Water type so much is that it's useful in almost any situation. I mean, just think about it. While it is weak to Grass, every single Water Pokemon, including Magikarp, can learn an Ice, Flying, or Poison move that counteracts this. This makes Electric the only true threat to Water types, and even then, there are several Pokemon whose secondary type neutralizes this. Also, they have a wide variety of moves, and although most of them are physical, the special attacks they have all complement the type very well. Also, aside from its speed, Water is very balanced when referring to stats. I mean, look at them! Also, Water holds a major trump card for all players with 4 very special moves. Surf, Dive, Waterfall, and Whirlpool. 4 freaking HM moves! There are several items, as opposed to just 1 or 2, that increase the power of Water-type moves. Lastly, this type, even more so than normal, is the most common type in all of Pokemon, and as such, has been paired with every single type except Fire, making it just as versatile as Flying. Aside from their below-average speed, which I really don't mind, I can't find a single thing wrong with this type. But alas, there is another. Well, since I can't do honorable mentions, I'll head straight into it. Now, most of you already know what my number 1 is, so before I continue, I'd like to remind you that this is my opinion, and that the only one who should take it to heart is me. Now, with that said, I used to hate this type. When I first started out with Pokemon, it was, without question, number 17. However, over time, it grew on me. As I played more and more, I started to appreciate what this type was and what it could do. Then, when I really started to get into playing against my friends, I realized how important strategizing really was. That's when it happened. Using this type, I managed to create a strategy of my own that has never, I repeat, never failed me. And that is why it's number 1. Ladies and gentlemen, Poison. Surprised? So was I. I think I already explained why this is my number 1, but while I'm at it, I might as well talk about everything else. First, if you thought water had balanced stats, take a look at these. Also, they're one of the best types defensively. Yep, right up there with Steel. Also, they are the absolute best type for fighting with status ailments, both inflicting and receiving. Not only are poison types able to absorb certain status ailments that are inflicted on them, they can also dish them out in scarily large amounts. Poison, confusion, sleep, and even paralysis are all at the disposal for most poison types, making them a pain to fight, but an absolute joy to unleash. On the flip side, poison is easily susceptible to the ever-present earthquake, and is only super effective against one type. However, with the strategy I developed, that's no longer an issue. Oh, you're wondering what that strategy is? Psh, as if I would tell you. In the end, I find the poison type to be extremely underrated, even by Game Freak itself. Don't believe me? Here's a few examples. Poison used to be super effective against both grass and bug, but was then changed in Gen 2. Additionally, all Sinnoh poison types were completely left out of Pokemon Platinum. Third, and most importantly, it is the only type yet to receive a legendary. Why not, Game Freak? Hell, even the man himself, Boffle's minion, said that this was his least favorite type. But that's his opinion. And this is mine. Thank you for joining me on this week's episode of PokeMonth. Next up, top 10 Pokemon spin-off games. And I won't be alone.